It's that time of year again, Hearthstone players. I am very excited to announce that I am throwing yet another HELLSCREAM tournament, and I just want you guys to, be aware of this tweet. Go ahead and check out on this information. I have a lot of things going on, but this is not what we are here to talk about today. There is a cool tournament going on, but I am here to let you guys know about how the mini set was yesterday, and we're just going to jump right into it because I have a lot that I want to talk about, and there's one particular deck that I really want to show you guys because I really want to start playing this on stream. So if you like this kind of content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and, thank my cup of coffee for giving me all this energy because that's why I am just on it recently. I've been caffeinated, I have been motivated, and I am here to tell you that there is a lot in this mini set that maybe we kind of underappreciated and underassumed, but there might be, a couple of valid criticisms in the mini set because one thing that I definitely noticed is that it was a very underwhelming first day, but I do have hope because things like Imbue Rogue give me hope for fun and powerful decks. Could do less with, with the Dragon spam because on the first day, Imbue Rogue might be a sleeper of the mini set. Dragon Warrior is the day one king. Quest, completely unplayable, and the 4-mana 6/9 dragons are clearly broken. So these are the decks that I was trying out on the very first day, and honestly, I kind of stopped playing right when Aura Paladin became a thing. We will be talking about Aura Paladin, but that's the reason why it's not in this tweet, is because right when No Hands Gamer started playing that deck, and people really started giving it attention, I unfortunately had logged out of stream because I got very agitated by the amount of Dragon Warriors there are. This is definitely the day one king, and the meta is going to be warped around, can your deck beat Dragon Warrior? And this deck definitely does seem, beatable, but its popularity is extremely noticeable, and people are going to get tired if this is going to be the new tier 1 deck very quickly, in my opinion. That's just what happens with tier 1 decks. If they're all over the place, people get tired of them. But one deck that I don't really think I'm going to get tired of is Imbue Rogue. This is a deck that I kind of didn't rate very highly, and it seems like there's some potential from this deck. Top Legend players don't really seem, sold on it because the data is not that good. But this might be a way of taking your tempo Elise Rogue and adding some more value to it. So if adding value to your deck is actually good in this metagame, then there is possibilities for this deck to be more competitive, especially at the higher ranks. But again, the big question is, how does it compare to the Elise and tempo rogues that we already have? And if it's not better than that, then unfortunately this deck will just kind of falter and just be another flavor of rogue to play. But I do have to admit, this deck is very fun, and I will have a video talking about this because we had some very funny things that happened on the first day. But the other thing to talk about is the quest. I will be ranting about this at the end of the video, talking about why I am not happy about the quest design, because there is one particular problem with the quest right now. It has an extremely low win rate. And when I say extremely low win rate, brother, I am not kidding. 22% win rate when Zeddy took this screenshot, and I'm just like, how bad is this deck really? We will be taking a look at it ourselves to see if the data has gotten any better overnight, but it's just like, why even make the quest if they're going to turn out this bad? Like, come on. There's really just nothing else I can say about it. This video is not going to be a rant. It is going to be a breakdown, but there's got to be at least a little bit of rage if it's going to be a Clark HELLSCREAM video. So let's go ahead and take a look into what is going on with the metagame right now, because unfortunately, the way that HSReplay works is that it needs a couple of days in order to start, gathering all of the data, because it's not just going to spit out early sparse data unless you are really looking for it. But what you can definitely do if you are a premium member is that you can go to the last 3 days to try and give yourself the most up-to-date version of the data. And from what I can tell with this data is that, there's a lot of aggro decks that are seeing play, generally speaking, in the bronze through gold era, but you're already seeing that Aura Paladin is breaking through. You're already seeing Dragon Warrior breaking through. And if you decide to filter the data at Diamond through Legend, the data is really not 100% there because we still have things like Mid-Range Shaman and Cliff Dive Demon Hunter that are still in the mix. But you are definitely noticing Dragon Warrior with new cards is making its way into the data already, even though there is not a lot of archetypes that have been discovered yet. So this is just definitely proof that this deck is omega popular, and if you go over to HS Guru, you will see the almost exact same thing, to where, you got Dragon Warrior, Aura Paladin, apparently people are trying Starship Rogue, that's kind of cool, Control DK, and Imbue Rogue. These are definitely the decks that people were messing with the most, and if we look at the HS Guru data and filter by popularity, then you'll see at Diamond through Legend, the popular decks were Dragon Warrior, Control DK, Imbue Rogue, Aura Paladin, and Quest Warrior. These were the most popular archetypes at the Diamond through Legend era, and if you decide to go into just Legend, you will notice that it's kind of the same thing. So players are already playing, the obvious inclusions, the mini set cards that actually complement the decks that have already been a thing. Dragon Warrior got a huge boost, and Control DK, if you guys are not familiar, is actually really good now because of Remnant of Rage, the card that's essentially, 0 mana draw 2 with a very easy requirement, mind you. So, and if you look at top 1000 data, it's actually almost the exact same. Control DK, Dragon Warrior, Imbue Rogue, Aura Paladin, and Elise Rogue with, Discover Hunter still having a very extremely, respectable win rate. So I don't think this deck is going away either. It's just a matter of people, switching to the good decks after being bored from the mini set. But if we want to take a look at the new version of Dragon Warrior, I hate to say it, but it really doesn't run that many new cards except for the Slither Drake. This is just an extremely powerful card, and one thing that you are going to see a lot in your games is Whelp, Petal Peddler into turn 3, 7/10 that becomes a 8/11 with Elusive by turn 3. You thought Yetis on turn 2 or turn 1 were really good? Turn 3, 8/11 with Elusive is a hell of a thing to get through if you're not a rogue with Dubious Purchase, and Dubious Purchase is going to rotate, by the way. So this is going to be a card that I feel like is going to be very much on Blizzard's radar, because I have no problem with having this as a payoff, but I just think this thing has way too much attack. Like, maybe bring it down to 5/4, even 3, depending on how early you really want this card to be, put out into the field. But the one thing to also keep in mind before we start, putting our pitchforks up and demanding nerfs, is that a lot of these cards will be rotating out. Gift Wrapped Whelp, Petal Peddler, a lot of these dragons, low curve dragons are going to be out of the game, and unless they give Warrior a lot more, new resources to utilize, then maybe hitting this requirement will be a little bit difficult. But I gotta be honest, I'm already annoyed with this card, and I'm already annoyed of Dragon Warrior just due to its sheer popularity. I don't mind this card being powerful, but if I'm seeing it once every other game, it's quickly going to lose its luster. However, one deck that I believe is actually extremely fun right now is most Paladin decks. I think that Aura Paladin is a great example of what happens when you give good cards to classes. And Acceleration Aura is definitely one of the best cards in the mini set, not just because, Druid and Paladin now have ramp, but the most important thing to keep in mind is that right now, Paladin has 4 copies of this card in the deck because of the Violet Treasure Gill. And I think, someone can correct me on in the comments if I'm wrong on this math, but I believe the odds of getting either the Acceleration Aura or the Treasure Gill by turn 2 is damn near a 70%. Someone in the comments should definitely do the math because I'm not good at probabilities, but the point that I'm trying to make is that this deck is literally all in on just mulliganing for your Violet Treasure Gill or for your Acceleration Aura. So your turn 3 now has a lot of 4-mana plays that are possible. Elise into Location, for example. Manifested Timeways works perfectly with Acceleration Aura, and now we have a real reason to run Cardboard Golem, because now it just makes sense for us to accelerate our auras, give them extra durabilities, and just keep the value running. So this is just one of those, interesting things to see in Hearthstone when we finally have, what a mini set is supposed to do. It is now bolstering an archetype that was very close to being, meta relevant or really good, and now it just feels like it has everything it needs. This is an example of what mini sets can do, and I would really like to see more of this in the future. Aura Paladin, very good, extremely fun. And one other thing that I gotta point out, if you do have, Acceleration Aura on turn 2, and then you have the Weapon on turn 3, and then you have your Dorian on turn 4, you can easily get your Gelbin of Tomorrow playable by turn 5, and that's just the Omega high roll that really makes this deck extremely, satisfying when you pop that off. It's not gonna happen a lot, but when it happens, it really does feel good. But if you're not a fan of the Dorian high rolls, there's probably another version of this deck that we can play, but as of right now, this is the most popular version from day one. This next archetype, I'm going to show you guys 3 different decks because I'm not really sure the perfect direction on where to take Imbue Rogue, but this was the deck that I played yesterday that I will definitely be making a video about because this deck is actually a lot of fun and it really feels like it's kind of close to being a meta-relevant deck, but the reason why it feels that way is because there are a lot of just really powerful rogue cards that really carry this, this archetype. Obviously, Elise Shadow Step is extremely insane, but Flashback is still a really good card. You still have your combo cards with like Space Rock Collector, Nightmare Fuel, and obviously the insanity that is Deja Vu, Prep Doob. These are just good rogue cards, and now we finally have, like a different way of playing this with like value with the Imbue package. But the sad truth about this deck is that cards like Eudora are probably not going to be the best variant of this deck. Deos is probably not that good because doubling up on the hero power really doesn't matter if you don't have that much mana cheat happening, and if you're really just putting Deos to hero power twice, why not put in Sing-Along Buddy? And I really don't want to put in Sing-Along Buddy in this deck, but the idea behind putting Deos in this deck was not just to get the double hero power, but also if you get like a cheap 0 mana, Battle Cry, maybe you could, do something with that. So I don't think Deos is crazy, but there's not really a lot of good 7s for Rogue, in my opinion, unless you really want to go down the Dragon variant, which again, just didn't really feel that good to me. However, what if you decided to take out the Elise and just focus on having a low curve, tempoing out your cards, and using the hero power to get value as the game goes on? Because what I've really seen from this deck is that it does have a lot of mana cheating available, and because of the rewind on the hero power, you get a random minion from another class, and it costs 1 less, and it increases in its mana cost as you keep imbuing your hero power. You can get a lot of value from this, and a lot of people start their turns to see what they get, and then they just, you work with what they have. But the sad truth about this deck is that it seems to be the less you use the hero power, the more, the more powerful this deck becomes because you're just playing with tempo and you really don't want to be using the hero power until you imbue a lot. So that's why this version of the deck is going all in on trying to lower the curve, not focus on Elise, because you don't want to put yourself in this narrow game plan that a lot of people are going to be expecting. Now you can just focus on the value, push the button every turn, and maybe get some kind of weird mana cheat, scam or something like that. So if you like that kind of idea, this might be the way of going about it. And I really like this deck using the Eudora as like a top end to try and give this deck some sort of scam outside of the hero power. But again, I'm not sure about Eudora's actual meta capability, but this is definitely a fun way of looking at the archetype if you just want to focus on pushing button and letting random do its thing. And this is another version of the deck that is very close to the one that I just showed you with the Eudora, but I saw McBanterface playing this at top 10 legend. He did win his last game, but unfortunately, he still kind of had like a negative win rate. It was either he was 1 game away from 50-50 or he was exactly 50-50 with this deck. And at the end of his stream, he just really didn't seem very satisfied with this deck and essentially said the best plays with this deck is when I was not playing hero power. So again, this is kind of showing the problem that I had at the very beginning of the mini set, saying that if Imbue Rogue is not going to be stronger than Elise Rogue, people are very quickly going to drop the package and then just go back to regular Elise Rogue because its tempo is unmatched and it really doesn't need that much value. So if you want to try out this archetype, here are 3 different ways of going about it. I really am sad to say that I think Elise Rogue is just better, but I will admit that Imbue Rogue is actually a fun archetype, even though I kind of said that I thought it'd be boring at first. Imbue Rogue is actually a big W in terms of design, and I really like it. The next 3 decks that I am going to show you are all about Remnant of Rage. That is right, this is probably the best mini set card for the following reason. It's Corridor Creeper, and it draws you 2 cards. And it also has +1 attack, and it also has 2 tribes on it. This is just the greatest card in the mini set because it's just 0 mana draw 2 in classes that definitely want that and definitely, have a lot of minion combat. So I just feel like having this available for 0 mana is going to be the norm for this card, but it's not going to be the only way that you can play this card. Remember, if your opponent still has like a bunch of 1/1s and you have 1/1s by like turn 3 or something, you can trade those and play this card by like turn 3, and then boom, you just have a turn 3 6/5 that draws you 2 cards that can definitely definitely help you either find your Elise or find that next, turn 4 curve play. So this is just an extremely flexible card, and even if it's not being played for 0 mana, it's still extremely very, very good. So now what's happening is that Control DK has definitely started slotting it into the deck, because now they can just get through their deck extremely effectively. They can play their Ysera as quickly as possible. They can play their Kerrigan on curve. They'll always have their Hideous Husk on 6 because their card draw is just even better now. We don't need to be running Sanguine Depths anymore in DK, and it's been completely made irrelevant by the test of time now. It's really funny how, one card can really just come in and just completely shatter expectations, because now Sanguine Infestation is no longer a card you even care about. Why pay 5 mana for draw 2 when you can pay it for 0? So yeah, Remnant of Rage is very good right now. Control DK feels like it's going to be on a non-stop rampage, and I think at the data we were looking at earlier, it was the highest win rate in terms of all of the rankings. So if you want to, if you want to win games and if you want to play a couple of new cards, it turns out DK is a big W right now. But if you're not a fan of playing a Control DK, I did my best to try and find a different variant of DK with new cards, and I'm not sure what this is, but as I was looking on HS Guru, there was a deck called Frost DK, and this is what popped up. It uses Bygone Echoes, so I think it's kind of cool that it's trying to utilize some of these new cards in a little bit of a different way. It's got a lot of corpses and a lot of early game aggression, and if that gets knocked down, you can then use your Bygone Echoes to summon up a new board. I think... But it's another deck that runs a Remnant of Rage in a slightly different way as like an aggro top end to help you get the rest of your damage to lock out games. So I think this is a pretty interesting way of going about this archetype if you are trying to use Bygone Echoes, but I'm going to be honest, I really don't believe in this card except as like a random out in your Elise location or potentially from things like Illidari Studies. And now we have what is probably my most favorite archetype that I have seen since I have started playing the mini set. And what happened was I was playing Aura Paladin last night to really get some practice with the deck before playing it on stream today. And well, I went up against the Demon Hunter, the very first Demon Hunter of the season, that was doing a very crazy combo. He literally just drew through his deck. He played Fellfire Blaze into Portal of Argus, which is actually low-key genius because it's just a 2-mana deal 2 damage to the entire board, as well as accelerating your win condition of the portal, because that's right, the portal is your win condition. The whole point of this deck is to actually draw through the deck quickly, play your Brozagar, bounce him with Brewmaster, hit him in the face again. And the reason why this can be very effective is because throughout the entirety of the game, you are playing small minions like Patches, Pirates, you have Dangerous Cliffside, you have your Remnant of Rage and Ziliax in order to pressure the face. So this is not necessarily an OTK deck where you are trying to deal 30 damage all in one turn. This is like a burn deck that is trying to draw through its options, play minions, pressure you, and then suddenly burst you with a large amount of damage all at once. And when I went up against this deck, I went up against a double Brozagar turn as early as turn 7. So I think this is the deck the guy was playing. I tried my best to recreate it. I didn't have the full list, but this is the list that I have currently settled on while testing this for about, 4 or 5 games. And I'm going to be dedicating most of my stream today to seeing if this deck is playable. So if you guys like this deck, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because there's going to be a lot more interesting decks that we are going to find. I am not going to rest until we look at every single stone and we uncover everything in this mini set. I just really want this deck to be good, but it looks a lot of fun, and if you like burn decks and combo decks, this is going to be a definite favorite of the mini set for you. And now it's time to talk about the quest. Oh boy. This card is bad. Quest Warlock is probably going to be one of the worst archetypes in the game, and Quest Hunter was an archetype that a lot of people were desperately trying to make work yesterday, including myself, and the sad truth about this deck is that it is just completely unplayable. It's just bad. Unfortunately, in order to make this deck consistent, you have to run a lot of combo tutor cards. Like, for example, the only way to really win with this deck is to fill up your hand with cards like Wilderness Pack or potentially Monkey Business, but Monkey Business is a 4-mana card in order to do that ability, so I would rather fill up my hand with discovering a bunch of cards and drawing out my deck in order to try and find that one pack. You fill up your hand, you fulfill the first part of the requirement, and then you can play the King Maluk in order to just throw throw out everything, get that quest reward. You can throw out the quest reward and then maybe activate its death rattle with Terrascale Stalker. If you are somehow not dead to all of the insanity that has already happened, you can finally activate the death rattle that empties out the opponent's hand. Now, I realize that a lot of people in the Hearthstone community are not fans of disruption decks, and I am not going to try and convince you on this archetype being healthy for the game or unhealthy, but you want to know one thing that I am really tired of in this game? I'm just really tired of everybody saying that I don't want a deck like this being a thing. I don't want disruption decks existing in Hearthstone. I disagree with that. I really like the idea of disruption being a slight favor that you can play and give yourself an edge against, a very control-esque meta. And one thing that I definitely said a lot at the beginning of my reviews on the miniset is that I hope that this deck can be a thing, so that way if Control DK and if Control Warrior are still running rampant, I can run a deck like this in a pocket meta going up against a lot of those types of players, and I can give myself an edge. This doesn't need to be a tier 1 deck to where it can beat everything, but it needs to be, like a flavor that I can bring on the right day in order to maybe be successful with it. But the sad truth about this archetype is that when you look at the data, it is just not good whatsoever. And I'm not even sure if this archetype is going to be able to meaningfully deal with these types of control decks anyway. If you look at the data for what is going on with this archetype, it is not good. 25% win rate. Oh my dear God. Oh my God. I mean, Imbue DK is 21%. Like, dear God, this is just kind of showcasing the point that I'm making, is that when you see stats this badly for an archetype, you don't touch it. Most players look at this and are like, all right, well, I can't invest into that, so that's just a bad investment. This deck may look fun to me, but now suddenly it's like if you get the quest, it's like, what am I going to do with this garbage? Because it's actually garbage. And this is just something that is just really sad to me, is that I really like this style of archetype because it's a puzzle. It's not just about, oh, yes, we are good against control, but how can we not just die immediately to aggro? So that way you have to build the deck in either one of two ways. You just die immediately against aggro, which is a very common occurrence for these type of decks, or you go all in on trying to build a deck that can maybe deal with the board while still being favored against control. This is what makes these archetypes exciting for me, because it is all about, figuring out the perfect build. It's not all about, just doing the combo as quickly as possible. It's about doing the combo as consistently as possible. It's not about just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's about the buildup. It's about the stall. It's the, oh no, I'm gonna die if I play, the combo in the fastest way possible, so I have to slow down my game plan in order to keep myself alive and focus on survivability. That's what makes these decks excitable, and I really just dislike the take of, brother, you do not want this playable. They are right that quests are unhealthy because it turns every game into, did they turbo quest? Okay, I lose. No, okay, I win. It's horrific gameplay, and they should not have wasted a legendary slot on this card. And the reason why I'm responding to this is not because I think this guy is wrong and I want to be like, haha, owned you, this is my opinion. This is just a common sentiment that I see with quests, and I'm not saying that I want quests to be tier 1 tyrants. I just want the deck to be functional right now, and in Warlock, the deck is not functional, and in Hunter, it's Omega terrible. I just want the deck in order to have, a spot in the meta, or a spot as like a tier 3, tier 4 deck, and it's not even a tier 5 archetype. It's tier 6, it's tier 7. It's completely unplayable, and I really just don't like the idea of people being like, Clark, you don't want this to be in the game because you are only thinking about what is happening if this goes perfectly. If they just play the quest on 5 and immediately play Terrascale and get rid of your hand, yeah, that is really bad. But we're not thinking about what's happening when the board is still a big part of this game, to where a lot of people who have played this archetype, when they get value from their quest reward, they're still just dead on the board anyway. And then there's the whole argument of, well, what if we decide to run the Omen in the deck, This is a really cool idea that I think would be a very interesting way of putting more combo decks into the meta in order to drive out some of these value, control decks that we just keep seeing all the time. Control DK and Control Warrior feel like they're still going to be dominant in this metagame, and I would like to try and bring a little bit of a different flavor to the party that might incentivize a slightly different change in the meta. And I know that's never going to happen. I know that's a completely, ridiculous expectation, but that's just where my disappointment comes from. I wanted to try this card. I wanted it to be slightly good. And now after seeing the data with it, seeing that it is a literal 20% win rate deck, how can I find the motivation to play this card? And then that also begs the question, if you were going to make this card very bad at the beginning, Blizzard, why even print it to begin with? So it's a disappointment for the people that are excited for it. It's a disappointment for the people that are not happy about this card, because if it ever becomes good, they're just going to hate it even more, even though this card is already a 20% win rate deck and they already hate it. It's a lose, 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 lose for everybody involved. And that's what makes me upset about this. I don't want this card to be tier 1. I don't want this deck in order to be, the next Dragon Hunter where you can't avoid it. I just want it to be another flavor in the pool of Hearthstone decks that you can play without worrying about, am I ever going to win a game with this deck? It doesn't inspire confidence, and it really drives me crazy because I don't want to be told that I don't want this in the game. Yes, I do. I just don't want it to be a meta-relevant strategy. I just want it to be another deck to play. That's it. Ooh boy, I spent a lot more time ranting in this video than I thought, but that is my thoughts on the first day of the mini set now that we have some data and I have played some games. I'm still very excited to try out the Demon Hunter deck, so if you want to see that, we are probably streaming right now. Go to the stream. Go. Click the button. It might be right here. But thank you for making it to the end of this video. Thank you for dealing with my caffeinated brain, and we will see you for the next video.